Welcome to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in the first trailer for the Eternals. This is weird, this is awesome, it's Marvel, and I'm here to explain all of it. The trailer begins on the shore of a primitive culture looking out into the sea when the ship of the Eternals emerges. This is calling back to the myth of the three ships. Essentially, it goes that a colonizing force arrives at a hunter-gatherer culture, and the people on the shore are not able to see the colonizing ships. The idea being that the appearance of these ships represents something so alien that their minds can't process it. The same applies here to these Paleolithic humans beholding the arrival of the Eternals. Alright, so who are the Eternals? Let me give you a brief explanation. Millions of years ago, the Earth was visited by the Celestials. These are beings that are kind of like Ego, except these Celestials wore gigantic Tron suits. We actually saw one of these, Isan, in a flashback in Guardians of the Galaxy.
There's a little pea coming out of me right now.
The Celestials travel the universe, mucking around with the DNA of various races to create the strongest possible people. On Earth, they created two offshoots of humanity. The Eternals, who were immortal, beautiful, super powerful, and became the myths of ancient gods to the human beings. Then there were the Deviants. These were the monsters who lived underground and became the basis for the myths of monsters and demons. The song playing in the trailer is The End of the World by Skeeter Davis. Here, it's appropriate for several reasons, because to this tribe of people, the sea does represent the end of their world, but also the arrival of the Eternals means that their culture is about to change forever. Essentially, the end of the world as they know it.
I feel fine.
But this song could have another larger meaning. The Celestials routinely visit Earth to check up on things, and their visits are called hosts. The first host created the Deviants, the second host created the Eternals. The third host is when the Celestials come back to Earth to judge if it's worthy or not. If it's unworthy, they destroy the planet like we saw in that Guardians flashback. So, the Eternals could be trying to stop the literal end of the world as the Celestials are returning to judge the Earth. Yes, I know Ego did say that he was the last of his kind, but maybe he was wrong? After all, he was a baby by Celestial standards. He could have just been left at the Celestial gas station as a child and thought he was alone in the universe. So let's look at the meaning of the song itself. The metaphor of the song is that the world may as well have ended because the indirect object of the song, that's you, no longer loves the singer of the song, Skeeter Davis. This could also have another parallel. As we'll see later in the trailer, these primitive cultures worship the Eternals as gods. And for reasons we'll discuss, eventually humans stopped worshipping the Eternals and they fell out of power. Then we see Gemma Chan's character Circe, ostensibly the main character of the film, speaking to Richard Madden's Icarus. Circe, of course, was the basis for the Greek myth of Circe, and her powers are to cast illusions. Icarus has much more typical superhero powers, flight, invulnerability, super strength. Here, the two of them are looking down at the primitive people. She says,
"It's beautiful, isn't it?"
And I don't think she's talking about the landscape. She's referring to humanity, carving out a civilization for themselves on this little patch of land. Next we see Angelina Jolie's character Thena, the basis for the god Athena. Now notice her costume is covered in these geometric shapes, which we see repeated in the other Eternal suits. This is calling back to the early designs of comic great Jack Kirby, who created the Eternals. But the official Eternals merch also shows that every member of the team has a symbol like this associated with them, and then they kind of link up in the middle. This is symbolic of the Unimind. The Unimind is when the Eternals are able to link their consciousness together and create an unstoppable force, like when the Planeteers use their rings to create a Captain Planet.
Go Planet!
But the Unimind can only be initiated by one Eternal, who's called the Prime Eternal. In the comics, this is Zuros, the basis for Zeus. Now in the comics, Druig, who we'll see later in the trailer, tries to become the Prime Eternal so he can take control of the group, but more on him in a bit. Then we see Salma Hayek as Ajak. In the comics, he's the only Eternal able to communicate with the Celestials. She is watching Phastos, played by Brian Tyree Henry. In the books, Phastos is the weapons maker of the group, but here, it doesn't appear as if he's making weapons. To me, this looks more like a map. Maybe he's mapping out the path of the Eternals throughout time, trying to predict where their actions will lead. Or he could be a scholar, studying the universe through their geometric shape powers. Behind him, we see Sprite. In the comics, Sprite is eternally young, the basis for the mischievous characters like Puck. There is one run of the Eternals written by the great Neil Gaiman that I think will be the basis for this movie. In that story, the Eternals have forgotten their past, and they're living normal human lives. Sprite, ever the mischievous one, caused this to happen because he was tired of always being treated like a child, even though he's thousands of years old. So I think that something definitely causes the Eternals to lose their memories before the film even starts, or else they would have shown up to help out against Thanos in Infinity War. Now, this room is interesting, and we'll see it later in the trailer. The displays in the background look like evolutionary charts like you'd find in a science book or the Natural History Museum. This could be how the Eternals track the progress of life on Earth. It's also cool that when Circe irrigates this land, we see her powers manifest as these same geometric circles. The voiceover says,
We have watched, unguided.
Meaning that throughout the millennia, they have just nudged people forward, giving them little bits of progress at a time. But then later she says,
We have never interfered.
So these two ideas seem to contradict each other. They watch, they guide, but they don't interfere. So I think there's more to this. I think they're saying that they don't choose which humans live and which ones die. They don't step into human conflicts or rescue them from themselves. But when their ancient foes, the Deviants, attack, they step up to stop them. The Deviants are always trying to enslave and destroy humanity. The Eternals would want humans to be free to evolve on their own. Now notice they're handing a knife out to this primitive person on the beach. This could be a special weapon meant to fight the Deviants. Next we see Thena in what appears to be ancient Babylon. The weapon she's holding is part of her powers. She can summon pure cosmic energy from the universe to create weapons. This is also very similar to Doctor Strange and the other sorcerers, summoning energy from other dimensions to create their weapons. In the comics, this cosmic energy is called the Power Cosmic, and it's what gives the Silver Surfer his powers. WandaVision also referenced
CMBR. That's
relic radiation dating back to the Big Bang,
which could tie Wanda's powers and the Infinity Stones to the same energy source. Here we see her facing off against or sparring with the man who has, holy crap, look at that, a very early model of Captain America's shield. Now we could go crazy with this and talk about time travel or speculate that Steve Rogers was a secret Eternal, but I think this is a more symbolic meaning. Superheroes are our modern day myths. The Avengers, after all, are a knight, a soldier, and a god. Superman's like Hercules, Batman's Odysseus, Flash's Mercury, you get the idea. Myths and stories of heroes are perpetual. Similar stories appear in multiple cultures around the world because we all share a very similar history. The appearance of a shield like Captain America's is just a way of showing that the stories of history repeat themselves. The symbol on Thena's forehead is another indication of the circles that show the manifestation of each Eternal's power, which again, I think represents the formation of the Unimind. And then there's this line.
Unseen them, accomplish wonders.
This is Sumeria, the ancient city of Babylon, in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. This is the result of the Eternals encouraging humanity. We can even see the famous Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the wonders of the ancient world. It could even be that the prehistoric people we saw at the beginning of the trailer are the ancestors of the ancient Babylonians. This is the famous Ishtar Gate, which you can visit a replica of at the Paragon Museum in Berlin. The Eternals standing in front are Thena, Icarus, Kingo, and in the center is Gilgamesh, the ancient warrior who is the basis for the earliest written myths of human history. But then again, in one comic, a time-traveling Captain America did team up with Gilgamesh. So maybe when Steve was out clipping all the branches, he swung by Babylon for a side adventure. They're joined by Makari, played by deaf actress Lauren Ridloff. Now notice there's a wrecked wagon behind them, and they all seem to be facing off against a strong force. They're not protecting Babylon from a human army. I think they're facing off against an army of the Deviants. Or this could even be an extraterrestrial threat, like early Skrull or Kree scouts who came to Earth for conquest. Then they encountered the Eternals and decided they should leave Earth alone. Next we see the same room that we saw earlier, but now it's modern day. On this throne we see Makari speed reading through these volumes, trying to catch up on all the Earth history that she's missed. This looks like their trophy room, where they've gathered relics of human achievement. Or, if the Eternals have lost their memory and now they've regained it, they could have gone around the world and collected artifacts to kind of catch them up on humanity's progress. Among the many artifacts you'll find the Ankh, the key to all life in Egyptian culture. This is a statue of a griffin, and the foreground here is a statue of a cat. Now I'm wondering if this is the panther god Bast, who the Wakandans of course worship.
A warrior shaman received a vision from the panther goddess Bast, who led him to the heart-shaped herb.
But my favorite Easter egg is this goblet, which looks an awful lot like the Holy Grail from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
You have chosen wisely.
The room is flanked by two statues that look like DNA helixes. Again, this is reminding us that the Celestials have interfered with humanity's DNA. But this could also be a hint about the future of the X-Men. In the comics, the Celestials implant a celestial gene within humanity that gives us the ability to one day become superhuman if that gene is triggered.
Mutation
It is the key to our evolution.
The X gene that creates mutants is essentially the same celestial gene. So if the third host does arrive on Earth and judges humanity worthy, then it could activate this celestial gene. Suddenly, kids hitting puberty all over the world would manifest their new powers. Next, we see Circe blinking backward and forward in time, again, like she's regaining her memory. There are a few flashes of armored men in the woods cutting down villagers. In the last trailer, we saw Thena fighting these people. I'm wondering if this is when we'll meet Dane Whitman, the Black Knight, seen here as played by Jon Snow himself, Kit Harrington.
Next time I see you, you'll be all in black. It was always my color.
The Black Knight has a weird, tangled history in the comics that we explained in a video a couple years ago, but here's the TLDR. His origin actually starts hundreds of years ago during Camelot. A knight named Sir Percy, a member of King Arthur's Round Table, was the first Black Knight. Merlin forges a magical sword called the Ebony Blade from a meteor. There were several Black Knights reincarnated over the years, and the modern-day incarnation is named Dane Whitman. With Doctor Strange's help, he finds this ebony blade, which, I forgot to mention, is cursed and makes him go crazy, so later he invents a lightsaber. Then he meets Circe and they fall in love. She does a kind of eternal Vulcan mind meld with him called a Ganjin that melds their souls and gives Dane Whitman the power of an Eternal. Now, Dane is a great character in the comics. He fights vampires, joins a British spy agency, and he's an Avenger with a flying horse. Now, in this movie, it seems like Circe is hooking up with Icarus, so I'm wondering if another Eternal, say Thena, falls in love with Dane Whitman, then grants him eternal life, essentially making him kind of an honorary Eternal. In the comics, Thena falls in love with the Deviant King, so this could be a spin on that storyline. Or, going back to the recurrence of Steve's shield and the way myths perpetuate throughout history, he could simply be a reincarnation of a man the Eternals met in the woods in the Middle Ages. We see Ajax and Phastos in civilian clothing being reunited, again supporting the theory that they are slowly regaining their memories. This is Barry Keoghan as Druig. In the comics, he disagrees with the other Eternals about how they should handle humanity. He would rather subjugate them, since the Eternals are the superior race. He plots against them to become the new Prime Eternal, the one who can initiate the Unimind.
Go play!
I think he's going to end up being the main villain here, maybe even responsible for erasing all of their memories to begin with. So we see him among these weird cult people in the woods that we glimpsed at in the last trailer. Eric Voss at New Rockstars theorized that Druig is trying to keep these people primitive, because that's the state he feels that humanity belongs in. To me, it looks like the other Eternals arrived here, expecting Druig to be mind-wiped like the rest of them. But then he's like, surprise, I remember everything and these people worship me. We can see him mind-controlling them into raising their guns against the Eternals, and in this shot, Kingo's fighting some kind of beast, maybe a deviant that's under the command of Druig. This is Gilgamesh, played by Ma Dong-seok in modern clothing, holding hands with who I'm going to guess is Circe. I think this is him reconnecting with her as she helps him to regain his full memories. Kevin Feige said that Circe is the closest thing this movie has to a main character, so it would make sense if she was the first person to remember, and then she slowly brings the others around. This shot is of Makkari saving a child from a falling pillar, maybe in Babylon. But the real question is, what made the pillar fall? If the Eternals don't interfere, then maybe they're saving people from an attack by the Deviants, maybe. But the markings here imply another villain. This is your mom. This shot of the Eternals on the shore shows them forming the Unimind. This appears to be the same shore where they found this ancient culture at the start of the trailer, to me implying that they judge these people worthy and have decided to join together to push their civilization forward.
I'm still worthy.
We see Circe and Icarus in 3 different time periods. Again, going back to the idea that in every culture, the same stories are repeated throughout time. This is how stories become myths, through repetition. This shot shows Circe, I think, turning trees invisible. So stay with me on this. What if she's masking the woods where Druig lives? Maybe, years ago, they trapped him here with some kind of concealment spell, and then erased their own memories so no one could ever find him. Or this could just be how the movie ends. They defeat Druig, but trap him here with his own creepy cult. Now this is a great look at Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo. In his civilian life, he's a Bollywood star. I'm guessing that this scene is from a Bollywood movie. Notice his costume is still very much like his Eternal suit. I'm wondering if even though their memories are erased, they still retain part of their identity. So he would still be attracted to costumes that look like the ancient suit he wore as an Eternal. Now this is very interesting, a volcano exploding on a shore. This could be the same shore where they encountered the tribe at the start of the trailer, and they're forming the Unimind to protect them. It could be the explosion was caused by the Deviants, and so this is the reason the Eternals Eternals step in to help. Or we've already seen in the Loki trailer that show revisits the destruction of Pompeii. So what if the Eternals show us this ancient city as well? And like while the volcano's erupting, one of them spots Tom Hiddleston in his variant jacket and he's like, what are you doing here? And then we can see the flip side of this scene in the Loki show. There is another possibility here. In the comics, the lost city of Atlantis was created when a war between the Eternals and the Deviants caused the continent of Lemuria to sink. And if you'll remember, we already saw a hint that there is an MCU Atlantis on this map way back in Iron Man 2. This is Sprite singing karaoke on what I think is Kingo's private jet. Notice that the seats are monogrammed with a K. So if I had to guess, as the Eternals start to regain their memories, they find one another one at a time, gradually getting the band back together before the third celestial host arrives on Earth. Hey there, Jon Snow, I already talked about you.
I don't want it.
Now, this shot is interesting. It's of Jon Snow and other people looking up a hill at something coming through the clouds. I'm betting that these are the other Eternals, and what they're looking at is Celestials arriving back on Earth. This also links to the ancient people at the start of the trailer, looking into the sky to see the approach of their gods. In the same way, the Eternals are looking into the sky to see the approach of their own gods, the Celestials. Kumail Nanjiani also suggested that the Eternals aren't actually from Earth. He said they were sent to protect humanity from the Deviants thousands of years ago. So maybe they're actually from Titan, Thanos' home planet. In the comics, Thanos is a deviant, an offshoot of his people. If the Eternals are from Titan, then it shows how they were a perfect, ideal race. This could also explain why Thanos' suggestion of fair and balanced genocide was so abhorrent to his people.
His passion is fair to rich and poor alike. They called me a madman.
Because Thanos was already an outcast, and this just reinforced to them that he was a monster. The trailer ends with the button of Gilgamesh hosting the others in his home. Steve Rogers and Iron Man get name-checked.
So now that Captain Rogers and Iron Man are both gone, who do you think's gonna lead the Avengers?
I thought it was interesting that Sprite calls Steve Captain Rogers, maybe because this was his earliest designation, the name he would have had when she first became aware of him. And then they all considered the idea that Icarus could lead the Avengers.
I could lead them.
So this was a great tease that left us with a lot of unanswered questions. If the Eternals did have amnesia for years, what woke them up? Was it Tony's reverse snap? Or did Dane Whitman, a proxy Eternal, gain his memory first and then wake up everyone else? What are your thoughts on the trailer? Let me know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Arey.